Hi there, I'm Eitan, and welcome back to the Wix Wiz. Today's tutorial is going to be talking about the new function calling parameter that you can pass into GPT. And this is really a huge step towards making more agentic AI chatbots. That means chatbots that can not only chat with a person, but can actually run functions and do things on your website, whether it's making a very simple calculator, which I'll show you, or to even query a database on your website. If you want to learn more about this new, really cool function calling, let's get started. So before we get started, let me just go over my setup. So what we have here, I'm using a chatbot template that I've used before. And what I've done is I just copied over the standard call to the OpenAI API for chat completions. And that's this get answer function. And into messages, I'm passing example messages. And when we run this function, what it returns is just that exact message that is returned from the AI. And it will have a role of assistant, and it will have the content of the message. And what we're going to do now is we're going to discuss how we can change this and have agentic behavior using the new function call. So let's go over to the API documentation. And you'll see here that we have a new section that has been added to the guides of GPT. And it's a section called function calling. And it outlines to us what needs to be done to activate this function calling and what the differences are. And then it points us to the API reference itself and to some examples. Okay, so essentially what we need to do as a first step before we start to kind of discuss the essence of this new feature is to use one of the most updated models of GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 if you have access. I'm going to use the 3.5 one just so that it's accessible to everyone. I'm not sure if everybody has GPT-4 at this point. So I'm just going to copy that over and go to our website, and I'm going to change the model here to that newest updated model. Okay, so that's really step one. The next thing we're going to have to do is really understand how we call functions with GPT. What's the difference? What's going on here? And the gist of it is that you can, I'm just going to go here to the reference. So you'll see here that inside of the request body, we have some things that are added. So first of all, within the messages array itself, we see here that there's an added role of function. And we see this name always existed or did exist recently before the before the function functionality. But here it's been added. It's required if the role is function. We'll talk about that a little later on. And we have this function call object, which is optional inside of the message. These are all things that can be used, but it's not really the core of this function call option that we have at the moment. What we really want to be talking about is what we have over here, and that is a parameter which is called functions. And this is going to pass in an array of function definitions. It's not defined exactly as you're familiar with the definition of a function in your language, in our case, JavaScript. But essentially what we do is we pass in a name of the function, a description of the function, and the parameters in a JSON schema. Okay, and we'll talk about that in 1 second. And the last thing that we're going to have to do is activate this function call parameter. And there are 3 options here. So we could have it set to auto. Auto means that the model will decide if it should call a function. We'll talk about what that means in a moment, or if it should respond with our standard response like we saw before. And that's up to the model. The other options would be to have none, which means that the model will never call a function. And so here it says that if we specify a particular function via name my function, that forces the model to call that function. So this, I'm still not 100% sure if this needs to be put over here or if this needs to be put over here, to be honest. But we're going to try that out later on. What I've played around with mostly so far is this auto option. So what it lets the function, it lets the model decide if it should call a function or not based on the user input. So let's explore how we do that. And so the first step will be to add this function call parameter into our API call. So I'm going to go right over here, and under temperature, I'm going to add function call, and I'm going to set that to auto. Okay, so now our model knows that if it wants to, it can call a function. The second thing that we need to add here is the functions itself. So functions, if you remember, it's an array. So I'm going to just leave an empty array right here. And up here on top, I'm going to define the function that we're going to pass in. I'm only going to offer it one function at the moment, but you can give it several functions here, and it can choose which function to run, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. But let's call this function, I'm going to make a very simple function that adds two numbers together. Okay, that's going to be the function that we're going to use. So I'm going to just say const my function. And this needs to be an object. So if we go right over here and we take a look again at what's defined here. So under functions, it's an array, and each object needs a name. Okay, so I'm just going to give it a very simple name of add. And the next thing that we need is a description. Okay, this is optional, but I think that this probably helps the model know if it needs to call your function or not. So it could infer based on the name of your function and based on the parameters of your function, but if you give a description, I think it'll be more accurate. This is purely speculation. I have not read that anywhere in the documentation. So that's what I think that the description is for. And I'm going to go over here and write description. And I'm going to say adds two numbers together and returns the result. Okay. And the last thing that we need to do is to pass in the parameters. And this is where things start to get a little tricky. Okay, so these parameters need to go in as a JSON schema. Okay, and here inside of the function calling guide, we do have an example of what that looks like. Okay, so that's right over here. Okay, so this is the functions array, and you can see here that they're defining it right inside, and they have the name of their function, the description of the function, and here is the parameters. Okay, and this is being passed as JSON schema, and in all of my experimentation, I always left the top level parameter as an object. So basically all of the functions that I've built so far have been functions that take one parameter, which is an object, and that object can contain several properties, which are the subparameters of the function essentially. It's not bad practice in general. It might be nice to experiment afterwards a little bit in terms of just kind of playing around with it and seeing how we can pass on parameters that aren't an object, maybe two separate parameters. And the key to that would probably be understanding JSON schema, which is the rules for how this functions schema is defined. Okay, so we'll see that each parameter has a type, and then it has certain properties. And then here, so because this is an object that has properties, if this was, let's say, an array, then it might have items. Like if we go over here and we take a look here at array, then we have here type array, and then we'd have here items, okay, instead of properties. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, so it really depends on kind of what you're passing in. And yeah, so let's start off with just passing in an object. And this object is going to have two numbers. So first we're going to have an object over here, and then I'm going to have I think it was type. Let's go over, yeah, so parameters and then type object. So whenever I'm learning something new from the documentation, I always try to make my first attempt as close to the documentation as possible just to get it working and experience it, and then go on a tangent and explore and try things out and read more in depth and do things that aren't explicitly in the documentation. Uh, that's just how I like to do things, and I think it works, so I do recommend it. And here in terms of properties, so we said that we have two things that we need, and that is the number 1, and we're also going to have number 2. Okay, we're passing in two properties. Each one of these properties is a parameter. Let's take a look here again. And yeah, so each one of these, I'm also going to have a type and a description. Okay, and then we can also define which ones are required for this function to work. So we're going to have both of these numbers as required because you can't really run an addition function without having two numbers. So I'm going to go back over here, and each of these is going to be an object, and it's going to have a type, which is going to be number. Whoops. Number. I always do that. I put the colon inside. And it's going to have a description. Again, I'm pretty sure this description is optional, but it can help the LLM extract this actual value from the message that the person sends. So here we're going to have description, and we'll have first number for or to be added. Okay, I don't know if that's such a good description, but it'll do for now. And I'm just going to copy this object over and put it right here as well, and have a comma here, and a second number to be added. That's the only real difference here. And if you remember, I said we're going to make these both required. So we're going to have here required, and just pass in here number 1 and number 2. Okay. And that's my function, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my function right over here inside of the array. Okay, so essentially we have an array of functions, which only contains one function, and what it's going to do is it is going to take the messages and it's going to decide, okay, do I have all the information necessary in order to quote unquote call this function? And we'll talk about what that means in a moment. And if we take a look here, so we could take a look at what it returns. Let's see, where is that? Okay, let's just run it and we'll see what it returns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of, so instead of returning data.choices message, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to return data, okay, because I want to see the full data object that comes back from our response. And here inside of the example messages, instead of talking about the Dodgers and whatnot, I'm going to create a new set of example messages and just comment these out. And let's change this to what is 1 plus 1? Okay, so we have a chatbot and a user is asking what is 1 plus 1? So if everything is working here, and we're passing in the example messages over here, then theoretically this model should know that it's supposed to call a function now, and that function would be the add function. Okay, so let's try it out. So I'm going to go over here and run. And we were returned with this, and here we have choices, and the finish reason is function call. Okay, so this is a good sign. This means that we actually called a function. And if we take a look here, so within our message, okay, we have role assistant, content null, so we didn't get any actual content back from the AI like we usually would, but we do have this parameter here, function call. And here inside of the function call, we have the name of the function, which needs to be called, which is the add function, and we have the arguments. Okay, so argument number 1 is 1 and number 2 is 1. Okay, and that's correct because we asked what is 1 plus 1, so it makes sense that the parameters here would be the number 1 and the number 1. This is still kind of raw data. Okay, so we still need to create some more tools in order to actually get this function running. Okay, so in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create the actual add function because we didn't do that yet. And we're going to create a helper function which actually executes the functions that come back. So I'm going to go back here to home. Sorry, not home, to playground. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another function here. And that's just going to be the add function. And it takes one object. And that object has number 1 and number 2. Okay? And then we have here const. Well, actually, I can just change this. I'm just going to change this to a variable that's called args. And then I'm going to open that object. So number 1 and number 2 will be equal to args. Okay, that's how we're going to get the numbers. And then we're just going to return number 1 plus number 2. Okay, so that is our add function. But we have to make another step. We have to take another leap between getting back that data, getting back this function call object, and actually calling a function. So I'm going to create another function here in the playground, and this function is going to be called function execute. Execute. Okay, and what this function does is it actually executes our functions. And this is going to take, as a parameter, it's going to take a function call, okay? A function call object. Okay, so what we need to do here is first extract the actual function call. So we're going to do choices 0 dot message dot function call. So actually, no. So let's do it like this. So I'm going to say const message equals to data.choices.message. I could also just extract it in an object, but let's do it like that. And then I'm going to have a condition here. So I'm going to say if there is a message.function call, then we're going to do what I'm going to write now. And otherwise, we're going to return this. Okay. And here inside of this, we're going to say const, let's say const result equals to execute message dot function call. And then let's return the result. Okay, so what are we going to do here inside of this execute function? The first thing we need to do is we need to parse our function call. So we could say const, let's call it function name, will be equal to function call dot, and we go back here just to double check, choices 0 message function call name add. Okay, so name and arguments. Okay, we have the arguments. So I'm going to go back to the playground dot name, and here we're going to have const function arguments equals to function call dot arguments, but this is still JSON. Okay, so we want to parse that JSON. So we're going to do JSON dot parse, and then we'll have an object with our actual arguments. Okay, And if we then need to check what this function name is. So I'm going to have here a switchboard, and we're going to take here the function name. And here we're going to have value, if let's say the value is add, then we're going to actually return add function arguments. Uh, hmm. Now it worries me that I guess because I don't need the break if I'm returning something here. Let's see if that works. I don't use switch that often, so yeah, but the reason I'm using switch here is because you could think that we want to maybe give this agent several functions that it can do. So let's say we have one that's add, but we also have another function that's subtract. Okay, and then in that case, we would return another function, which is, let's say, subtract. Subtract. Okay, we're going to talk about that soon. I didn't create this function yet or anything, so I'm just going to comment out for now. And this might not be best practice to return within the switch. So yeah, if that's not the case, we might need to do like let function, and then yeah, maybe let's do it like that to begin with. Let result, okay? And then I'm going to say result equals add function arguments, and then here we're just gonna, after the switch, we're gonna return result. Okay, so this is our execute function, okay, which actually executes the functions based on what we get back from the AI. So now if I go here and I run get answer, and again, we're saying the same thing. What is 1 plus 1? Returned with 2. Okay, so now we're actually executing that function, and we are returning 2. Okay, so let's play around a bit. We got the fundamentals down, so let's explore a bit. Let's try some new things. So let's try adding an additional function, which is subtract. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add in my subtract function. So I'm going to go over here and add that in. I'm going to say let, result equals subtract. And we actually need to declare that subtract function. So function subtract. And this will also take two numbers. And it's just going to return number 1 minus number 2. And we also need to define another function here for the AI. So this is going to be add function. And here we're going to have another function, so const subtract function. I could also declare these outside of the, outside of the get answer function. They don't need to be in here necessarily. And it's going to be very similar, so I'm just going to copy over what we have here and just put that right over here. And let's change it up a bit. So here we're going to have subtract, and this name needs to match whatever we're going to have here in the switch. Okay, it doesn't necessarily need to match the name of the actual function, but it needs to match the switch. And this is how I understood that you're supposed to do it, based on just checking out the OpenAI cookbook, which is linked to from the documentation. So if you go over here to this guide, the guide for examples, I think it's, oh no, sorry, it was, where was the link to, I think it was, might have been this. Yeah, this links to the cookbook. And here everything is Python, unfortunately, so I had to kind of translate things. I have very minimal Python knowledge, but based on what I saw they were doing here in this example, I think that this is the way to go about it, using that kind of like execute function. If somebody knows of another better way, different way, let me know. Yeah, so okay, so we have our subtract function here, and it's subtracts one number from another. And we have number 1, first number to be first number in subtraction equation. Okay, so here it actually does make a difference what the first number is and what the second number is, because subtraction doesn't work like addition. And this is the second number to be subtracted. Okay, and here, instead of just my function, we're going to pass in add function, and we're going to pass in subtract function. Cool. And now let's play around with it. So I'm going to change the prompt here from what is 1 plus 1 to what is 7 minus 3. And I'm purposely using like word numbers here just to kind of make it harder for the AI and see if it manages to figure it out. Yeah, so let's try that out. And it returned with 4. So that worked. Okay, so there's a lot of cool stuff happening here. So there's first the AI is figuring out which function it needs to call. Okay, are we doing subtract here? Are we doing addition? And then it extracts the data. Okay, so it extracts my arguments, extracts the parameters from the data, from the person's interaction, and then it kind of returns everything with the name of the function and the parameters. And then we have our own stuff that we built that kind of takes that and processes it into an actual number. And we would have to format this again if we want to return it to the user. So let's say if I go right over here, so instead of just returning result here, what I might want to return is an object, okay, which has role assistant, and then we have content would be result. Okay, that way we can actually use this response in a chatbot and just shoot it back to the user. What we might want to do is build kind of another agent which takes the response of this agent, and I'm using the word agent here because essentially this is not just a call to an API. This is a kind of a intelligence which can do things. Okay, it has several things that it can do, so we can call this the add subtract agent. And this is an agent that knows that it should either add together or subtract or kind of just respond that it doesn't have all the information that it needs. Okay, that's what it will do if it doesn't have the parameters that it needs. We might need to add a little instruction about that here inside of the system message. Okay. And yeah, so let's try that out actually. So let's try now asking a question that is not related to numbers. So I'm just gonna change my example messages here. So I'm gonna say, what happens, or it's gonna be related to numbers, but I'm not gonna give it all the information that it needs to do the addition or subtraction. So what happens if I add 3? Okay, let's see how it answers here. So I'm going to run. And okay, so we returned with assistant content null. So that's interesting, not what I was expecting. But this has to do with how we were handling. Yeah, so let's just console.log message over here. Try running that again. Like basically it did not know which function to call because, I mean, there's not enough information. But let's see. Okay, so we do have function call. Add number 1 is 3. Okay, so that's a bit surprising because we do have both of those numbers as required, but it still did the function call with only number 1. Required, we have number 1, number 2, number 1, number 2. Let's take another look at the docs here. Okay, so I took another glimpse of the docs. And I think I made a little mistake using the required here, because you'll see here that the required, here we have, okay, so this is location, unit, and then we have properties, and this required is within the parameters, but I accidentally put it outside of the parameters. Okay, so this actually needs to go over here. Okay, my bad. And we're going to do the same for the subtract function. So essentially, because the required, it didn't know what was required, so it let the function call happen with only one of my parameters, with only one of the numbers. So let's go ahead and try that again. Yeah, okay, let's see. And okay, this time it returned 6. And let's see, so it said number 2, and number 2 was 3. Okay, so it basically, it kind of coerced, um, it just took the only number that it could find and it forced it um, into both parameters. So this is kind of the hallucination version for functions. So this is, I'm really happy this is happening because it really is very educational in terms of how these things need to be built and the instructions that we need to give. So let's try being a little more clear here. Um, adds two numbers together. Let's try to see if the system instructions helps at all here. So you are a helpful assistant that does math equations. Um, if any information is missing for an equation, ask for it. Let's see if that helps at all. So I'm going to go ahead and try and we can get rid of the, I'm going to go ahead, no, let's keep it. Yeah, it does help. I'm just going to run this again. And this time it was returned with, yeah, okay, so it did the same thing. Oh, interesting. Okay, this time it decided that the second number was 0. Let's see, adds two numbers together. Let's try this. Needs two numbers from the user. Let's try that. So it's a whole new level of prompt engineering that needs to go into this. Okay. Um, so what happened here now is it did understand now that not to hallucinate. Yeah, so now it gave an answer that is just a regular answer that the AI would give if we weren't doing a function call. Okay, so this is not generated by any of the functions that we wrote, but it is not doing what I expected and what the documentation said, which is to ask for the missing information. Okay, so I would expect it to ask for, and let me just show you that here in the docs here. Again, this is all Python, but I don't think that's what should be making the difference here. So if we go here to, yeah, get current weather in a given location, and then what's the weather like in Boston? Where was that example here? Okay, maybe it's in the cookbook. Oh, here. Oh, interesting. So here, okay, this might help us actually. There's some, let's see. Just I want to show you what I was expecting to happen. Sure, I can help with that. Please provide me with the number of days you want the forecast for. So basically, they're creating like a get weather function here. So you need some specific parameters, and the parameters that you need would be, you need the place that you're getting the number that the weather for, but you also need, let's say, the number of days. And since that, that wasn't attached here, so the AI responds with a typical AI response, OpenAI response, which would be a role assistant and then content, what it needs. But the key might be here. Don't make assumptions about what values to plug into functions. Ask for clarity, and it's cut off. Um, let's see if I can find their whole instruction here. Let me try just plugging that in here. So you are, if any information, let's see, don't make any assumptions. Assumptions. Any information is missing for an equation, ask for clarity. Let's try using that word that they used over there. Okay, let's try that. So I'm going to go overhead here and run it. And I don't know why it's not working. I mean, it could just be that okay, so here I kind of asked what happens if I add 3. So it's kind of speculative question. It's not really a command. Maybe it's not understanding it enough as like a command to the function. But let's say if I just say add 3, something like very much like a call to a function. So let's try that. Sure, I can help you that. Can you please remind me 2 numbers that you'd like to add together? Okay, so that's a little better. So I guess if the prompt from the user, it's not clear enough that it's going for the function and the instructions aren't clear enough to the AI, then it doesn't really need to know. It doesn't really know that it should be answering with a clarifying question. It could be also a matter of just some prompt engineering over here. But this is really very interesting. And I do want to explore, first of all, how this looks in the chatbot itself. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to replace the function that is actually answering the chatbot at the moment with this current get answer function. So let's do that by going to the chatbot file. And here we're going to do import get answer from OpenAI. Sorry, background, backend slash playground. And we're going to get rid of this one from over here. Okay, so now it should be getting the answers from our new agent. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to publish that. Let's just do this test chatbot. And this is a clone of the actual template, so just to play around with. So let's go ahead to the site, and this should work. Yeah, so let's try this out. So I'm going to say, what is 5 minus 2? And 2, I think it's using the stream that I have set up. We want to turn off stream, so I'm going to go here to config and stream false. Yeah, when it's streaming, so there's another separate function that deals with the streaming, so that's why it's not calling the get answer function. Let's try that again. And copy that same question. Now it's being like really stuck up, and it's not even treating the 5 and the -2 as two numbers. Um, 3, 5 minus 2. Okay, that's being weird. So let's check that out and see why that's happening. So don't make any assumptions. Maybe that's a little too harsh. Um, don't make any assumptions that aren't provided by the user. Math equations. If any information is missing based on the user's questions. Let's try that. And I'm just going to run it here first in our playground just so that, oh, okay. I know what the problem is. That I did not switch out. Let me just reverse all that because that was kind of an assumption there. Don't make any assumptions. And here was the error. So I was passing in still the example messages, which is just add 3, so it's missing a number, so it asks for the two numbers. But what we want to do here is actually pass in the messages from the function. So that's messages, and yeah, let's try. And then here, I just want to make sure that in the chatbot, when I call get answer, last message. Okay, let's go ahead and publish that. And as we say, third time ice cream. So let's see what happens here. So it came back with content 3 role assistant. And the issue is, okay, this is a good bug actually. I'm happy that we encountered this bug. It kind of has to do a bit with having the additional agent that will translate it into something that's relevant for a bot instead of doing what I'm doing now. But the issue here is that this is a number, and we need to pass a string. So I could just add, let's say over here, I could just do result.toString. Okay, and that would solve the issue. But I think that we've gone far enough in the demonstration that we can work on creating that additional agent, which will actually utilize kind of OpenAI to translate the result into something intelligible for human beings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another agent here. So I'm going to say const, no, it's called function. What should we call this? Result to content agent. Okay, what this agent is going to do, it's going to take a result from a function that we called and then translate that into something that's content that can actually be used for chatbot. Because instead of just saying 2, we might want to change that into some kind of message. Your answer is 2, or 2 plus 3 is 2. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy over what we have here. And no, it'll be easier if I copy it from this one. So this is the original get answer function. I'm just going to copy in content from here and go to our playground. And everything you're seeing here that I'm kind of using be available either in previous videos or in the course that I offer on my website. Yeah, I'm not going to write everything again, but async function. And here, okay, so here in terms of messages, what I want to do for this agent is I want to say we're going to have a function that was called, and oh, we can't use the keyword function. So let's just say um, let's say function schema, and we'll also have the function call, and we'll also have the result. And what we're going to do here is we are going to say, we're going to have a prompt. So I'm going to copy over the example messages from here. And what I'm going to say is, your goal is to take a function schema object, the function call object, and the result of the function call, and translate it into a human intelligible oh, this is embarrassing. A human into an answer that can be understood. Or let's say into a plain text answer. That's better. Okay, let's do that. And here in the content, what we're going to have is we're going to have a few things. So we're going to have a template literal here. And let's say this is the function schema. And then we're going to pass in the function schema here. Whoa. And then let's have this is the function call. And then let's pass in the function call. And I might not understand what these things are, function schema, function call. I'm just assuming that because there's so much information in each of these objects, that it should be able to figure it out, but I might be assuming too much. And this is the result of the function, and then we'll pass in the results. Okay, and then we're going to pass in, so this is going to be the prompt, and we'll just pass that in over here. And here we're going to have max tokens 1,000. Cool. Yeah, so that kind of works. And now we just need to use this agent over here. So here, instead of just, a lot going on here. Okay, so instead of returning this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to const message, no, const result explanation equals await. And then we're going to have here what did I call it? Shoot. What's the name of the agent? Result to content agent. Result to content agent. Sorry for all the scrolling up and down. It's probably very confusing. Okay, we'll just write out result to content agent. And this takes the function schema. Okay, so the function schema, this actually is a bit complicated because we need to know which function we called. Okay, so what I'm going to do to simplify it for now is I'm going to get rid of the subtract function. Okay, we're only going to have add function. This is something that we need to solve in the architecture of our solution later on. But for now, just to keep things simple, we're just going to assume that if it called a function, then it called the add function. And then the function call itself we have, which is the message dot function call. And then here we're going to have the results. And then instead we're going to return this result explanation. I feel like I spelled explanation wrong. Explanation. That looks better, but it might not be right either. So let's try that out. And I'm going to go close some of these that we aren't using. And let's run get answer. Okay, so we need to pass in our example messages again over here. So message is going to be example messages, and let's give it a message which it can actually do. So let's say add 3 and 5, and let's try running this. So it was returned with. Unfortunately, without more information about the function schema and function call objects, I'm able to provide a specific answer. Can you provide me with more context or details about the function being called? Okay. So what I'm going to try doing is I'm just going to, whoops, we don't need that open. I'm going to go over here to, and I want to see console.log prompt. I want to see what this prompt looks like and why it doesn't understand it. Let's try that out. Okay. Okay. So this is the problem. It's an object, and basically I just need to change this to JSON.stringify, and this should be also JSON.stringify, and this should be fine. Yeah, it should just be 8. Okay, let's try that again. So this time it's passing in the JSON of what the function schema is and the function call. And let's see what it returned. Function add takes two numbers as an input, adds them together, and returns a result. In this specific function call, numbers 3 and okay. So it's in the direction. And I just need to change the instructions here. So your goal is to and um, and let's see. Your goal is to explain the result of a function call simply based on the function schema object, the functional, and the result of the function call. I'm going to add one more clarification here. Do not explain how the function works, just the result itself. And you can mention the arguments if necessary. Okay, let's try that. Again, this is just like a game of prompt engineering. There's nothing here really to teach. So if this doesn't work exactly as expected, then we'll just let it go for now. We'll move on to the next kind of mini project because there's still a bunch of things that I want to try and play around here, some things within the Wix context, which we haven't even touched on yet. So I'm just going to run this and let's see what happens. So this is pretty much the same thing. Okay, play around with it another time, but basically the idea is to take the actual answer from the result and to turn it into kind of something that's a little more friendly, chat friendly. So instead of just saying, like if somebody asks what is 3 plus 3, instead of just returning the character 8, we would say, 3 plus 3 is 8, or your answer is 8. Anyway, that's what I was trying to go for here. I think the general approach is correct in terms of how to create an agent. Maybe how the schema and the call are passed in, how the instructions are given. That's what needs to be played around with here. It's just really a matter of prompt engineering. So that's that. So now what I want to do is to go ahead and explore some more advanced use cases, like let's say how we can use this to interact with a database and maybe run some queries and stuff like that. So let's take a look at that now. So in order to test out a slightly more advanced use case, what I've done is I've created this data set. It's called mock data. I'm using mock data from Mockaroo, which I like to use. And I just kind of created a collection. And these are the fields of the collection. So we have first name, email, last name, IP address, and gender. Okay. And basically what we're going to start off doing is to create an agent which can query this database. Okay, so based on a question that somebody asks the AI chatbot, it will query the database and return information from the database. So in order to do this, we have to start by building out our function and building out the schema for our function. So let's start with the function itself. So I'm going to kind of go over here and I'm going to declare a new function. This is going to be an async function because we're querying data. We're going to need to import Wix data here at the top. Let me just zoom in because I think I zoomed out before. Let's see. Zoom in one. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to import Wix data here up top. Import Wix data. And right over here, we're going to have query mock data. And this query mock data, so we're going to take in some parameters, which we'll discuss in a moment. And we'll have here const mock data query result equals to await Wix data dot query. And here is the question of what do we want to query? Okay, so we're going to want to query based on either first name or email or last name or IP address or gender. Okay, so that means that these are all things that we're going to want to get ideally inside of our params. Okay, so here we're going to have args, and these args can be split up into our fields from our database. So we'll have here first name and last name, email, and IP address, and gender. Okay, and this will be equal to args. And then what we're going to do is we're going to allow this function to take either some or all of these parameters. So we're going to run a query with whatever we have here. If we only have, let's say, first name, then we'll run a query just by first name. If we have first name and last name, then we'll run a query by both, etc. So what we're going to do here is say, I'm going to put in conditions. So I'm going to say, let Wix let's say let query, and then I'm going to say if first name, then we're going to have to add this to, let's say query equals query dot, no, let's say first name. Okay, so now we need to do two things. Okay, we need to check here and see if this query is undefined or not. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to say if this query is not undefined, okay, this means the query has been already defined in some way. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have query.or. And here we have to make a choice if we want to make our query more restrictive or more inclusive. So let's say if we have a first name and a last name, do we want to find only people that have both the first name and the last name that match these parameters? Or do we want to find either the first name matches the parameters or the last name matches the parameters? So or would be more inclusive, but I'm actually going to use and here because I think that if I provide a first name and last name, then I'm looking for someone with that first name and last name and not or. But this might also be kind of a more advanced agent that could decide that based on the language. That's a little more advanced than what I'm hoping to get to in this tutorial. So let's just say const first name query equals to wixdata.query, and we're querying the mock data collection, and we're going to find any item where the field first name contains the first name variable that we get here. Okay, and then we're going to add this to our query if we have that parameter. And this is kind of firing off a little error here, but I don't think that it'll actually not work. I think it's just a type error. And if that's not the case, then we're just going to have this equal to first name query. Okay, so if our query already has some kind of value to it, and it shouldn't because this is the first if that we have here, but I do want to create a template that will be the same for all of the parameters in case I decide to move them around or something like that. So now we can just really just copy this over, and we're going to have this here. I'm just going to add, oh, that's at the end. Okay, so here we're going to have last name query, and this just needs to be changed to last name. And then this needs to be changed over here. And yeah, you can see this error is not throwing anymore because it knows that after this first one runs, then this shouldn't be the case anymore. And this should be last name. And this should be email. And this should be IP address. And this should be gender. And then here we have same thing. So here we have, whoops, I accidentally switched this one. This is email, and this is IP address, and this is gender. And then here we need to change these as well. So this will be last name, email, IP address, gender. And then here we're going to have these change these names as well. So this will be email query. And this will be IP query. No. Oh wow, I'm really messing it up here. Okay. And this one will be gender query. That should be good. So now we've strung all the queries that we're going to be making together, and then we just need to uh, return the results. So let's say return uh, await query dot find. I'm just going to throw in a suppress auth here. True. No, let's do this const query result equals this, and then we'll return query result dot items. Okay, I'm enjoying this. And yeah, so this looks like a good function. So now I'm just going to add this to our execute. I'm going to get rid of the other ones that we have here. So I'm going to comment this out. I'm just going to turn this into query mock data. Okay, and this all stays the same. Okay, so you see how versatile these functions that we're creating are. And here we do need to make some changes. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to try and use ChatGPT to do this. So I'm going to copy this over here, go to ChatGPT and say, create parameters in JSON schema like this for a function that takes first name, last name, email, IP, address, and gender. Mm. Cool, cool, cool. Description. Okay, this looks good. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And here it says that they're all required. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just, let's see if we could do, I wish for required it could be like one of the following or something like that. Um, but I'm going to leave nothing as required just to make this function a little more versatile. So let's go over here and throw in our new parameters. And whoa, getting a lot of errors here. Okay, so here we have, okay, I accidentally got rid of the actual parameters. And this will be the function that queries a database to find a record based on the information provided by the user. Okay, and yeah, so then let's see. What else do we need to change here? The name of the function is going to be the name of the function that we wrote here, query mock data. And this we can call um, mock data function. And we're going to pass that here into our array. And I'm going to get rid of our subtract function because we're not using it anymore. We have too much going on here already. And I'm going to return the result here, just so that we don't have to deal with this at the moment. And I'm going to change the prompt here to your helpful assistant. That, let's see, make this a little smaller. There we go. That helps people find a record from a database. Obviously, this is like very specific. Like you don't have to, like I'm afraid this might actually accidentally convey to the user um, kind of that this is the functionality where the user from their end, they don't really need to be exposed to the fact that we're querying a database. Like they can kind of have a more smooth user experience. But again, we're just kind of experimenting and trying things. So yeah, okay. I think this should be enough. So now I'm going to change this to like, give me information about Bob. Okay, so what I'm hoping is going to happen here is that we'll query our database for people whose first name is Bob. That's like what I'm imagining in my mind. And now let's see what will actually happen. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run. And we return with an array. And we have here someone whose first name is Babine. And yeah, cool. I wonder if that's the only Bob in our database. I wonder why. I need to just check the database itself because I really don't know. Let's see inside the mock data database. So I'm going to search here for Bob. Do a quick scroll. Actually, let's apply a filter. And we'll say first name contains Bob. Add the filter. Okay, so really that's the only value. That's the only one. So let's try running another kind of, give me information. Let's say list all the people whose first name and last name contain the letter B. Okay, let's see what happens there. And I'm going to add a um, console.log. Okay, so we are logging that, so we can see, because I want to see how it, what arguments it puts in there for the function call. So let's run that. Cool. So let's see what we got back. We got an array, 22 people, BB, BB, BB. Amazing, exactly what I was expecting. And let's see here. So inside the function call, first name B, last name B, nothing about email, nothing about gender, nothing about, okay? And yeah, so let's say here, so here you'll see that for the enum, we have male, female, or other. Okay, so this isn't 100% correct because you'll see in our list of mock data that, let's go with this filter. So we have male, we have female, and we have other genders as well, gender fluid, non-binary. But this is generally the use of an enum here is a good idea because we still only have, let's say, 4 or 5 different genders here that we can pick from. And we only want it to be one of those. So what I'm basically going at is, let's say, if I tell it to find me all the men, okay? So if I didn't give it the enum, then it might use men as the as kind of the string here for gender. But what I'm hoping is that now that I tell it to look for all the men, it'll still search for male instead of just men. Because enum basically is a list of the possible results that this parameter can accept. So let's say list all of the men. So I'm going to go ahead and try that to get answer and get run. So we did get back results, and yeah, all of these are going to be males. And if we take a look here at the function call, it wrote male here. Even though I asked for all the men, it knew that it should look for male instead of men. So that's really important when querying data to have those things defined if you only have a fixed few options there and you want to be able to hit it. Yeah, I mean, this is still kind of a limited querying option, and also it's returning everything as item like as Wix data items. So we kind of also still have to translate between that. So we could try using our agent again here. So I'm going to try and simplify our agent, result to content agent. So I'm just going to take a result and I'm going to say, yeah, this is the result of the function. And this I'm going to do JSON.stringify result, stringify result, because this is going to come back as an array of all our items. So I really want to give a result that, and it could be that we really need to create very specific agents to different kind of results that we're expecting. So let's just change this prompt here. Provide a let me think of the prompt that we want to write here. Convert the JSON data into plain written text for humans. Let's try that. And then we're going to use our agent up here. Instead of just returning the result, let's go back to returning our agent. And here we just need to pass in a result. We're not going to do the whole thing with passing in the function, etc. So let's try that and see what happens here. So I'm going to get rid of that. And again, we're asking for a list of all the men. Let's see what happens here. The function returned an empty object. I think it did. This is the result of the function. Okay, so maybe, okay. Yeah, I tried to stringify an array. I guess that's not possible. Cool. The result of function. So let's do result. What happens if I do result dot to string? How do I coerce? How to coerce an array into a string? Let's ask ChatGPT. How to coerce a, a JavaScript array into a string or JSON. Da, 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 da. Oh, join. Oh, it seems I could use JSON.string. Why didn't that work then? Console.log prompt. Let's see what that returned. Found an empty object. Why is an empty object? Equals execute. Okay, so the problem here, I think, is not that I use JSON.stringify. That's right the first time, but the fact that this needs to be an asynchronous function because our execute function is running this query mock data is a promise because it's a data query. So let's try that again. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Again. I add a weight up top. C equals await execute. Okay, at least something interesting is happening. Okay, so we have all this, which is cool. And let's see. So what I'm thinking is that maybe the prompt was too long because I only have max tokens 1,000, but this is 50 or 100 items here that we might be converting. So what I could do is let's limit with query dot limit 10. So it'll only give back 10 results. And let's try that again. Yay! Not at all what I was hoping for, but at least it's working. The function returned a list of 10 objects, each representing a person. So basically, I wrote a summary of what the result was. I feel like it's kind of thinking in this very chat GPT-ish way. It kind of like assumes that it should be doing a certain job, which is like explaining how a function works, as opposed to taking the data and actually presenting it in a human readable way. Let me try, I'm going to try one more because I really do want to get this agent working. Um, you are given the result of a function in JSON format. Rewrite the result in a way that is readable for humans, such as a paragraph or a list. Your answer should contain the data from the JSON object. Fingers crossed. And let's see. Let's see. Nope. No. No. Interesting. It seems like it's being very stubborn to me. I think that this prompt is pretty decent. Um, let's see, instead of rewrite, let's say describe the results. The answer should contain data from data object. Do not explain how the function works or give general explanations without data from the JSON. That one. Like what I'm hoping to get back here is just like a plain text list. Name Bob, last name Jane, email bob@jane.com. That the function may have been used to retrieve information about users. It seems to be explaining the function. I don't know. Anyways, I'm going to take a look at this later on. I don't think it's being very fair, but yeah. Let's see, prompt. You know what I can try doing? Okay, I'm going to take one last step. What I'm going to do is, describe, put this here, and then I'm going to add this over here instead. Okay, so this will be given as the user's instructions instead of as the system instructions. Um, Explain, so describe the results. So this will be system, your goal. This will all be system. Let's say your goal. Okay. Describe the results in a way that's real in terms of paragraph. Let's try that. If that doesn't work, then it'll really be the end of the video. Yeah, you could take this opportunity to write a comment below, to like the video, subscribe to the channel, if you haven't done so already. I try to put out videos pretty much every week with stuff like this, stuff about Wix in general. Yeah, so if you're liking the content, then be sure to support. And, oh, okay. Yay, something a little better. Um, yeah, so here we have includes information. So the first names of the individuals are something, something, something. The gender of individuals, either male or female. Okay, it's a step in the right direction. I thought that it would be easier to create like a more generic agent that would just take results and present it in like a good way. Maybe there's just a lot more prompt engineering that has to happen here. Maybe those agents need to be a little more specific. But this video is getting quite long already. There are a lot more things that I want to do and play around and show with regard to this new function call functionality that we have with GPT. But let's just recap what we've done so far. So we talked a little bit about what the function call parameter is, how to use it and define the function, pass in the functions as a parameter, and how to then take the result that we get, which is the function call, and then use an executor function to execute that function and return the results back to our original function so that they can be at the end passed on to the user. We encountered different challenges along the way, such as creating an agent which would turn the function results into kind of a AI chatbot result, of trying to pass raw results back when we kind of hit that number barrier. Um, yeah, and just little things we encountered along the way. I hope you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.